In the cramped conference room at the Port Charles Police Department, the air feels heavier than usual. Case files lie open on the table like open wounds, photos and timelines pinned to the walls in a collage of chaos that refuses to resolve into a clear picture. For Dante Falconeri, this isn't just another assignment, it's a test of everything he has learned about justice, loyalty, and the cost of being wrong. Drew Cain has been shot, a family has been shaken, and the city is already whispering about who failed whom. Those whispers, Dante knows, are about to become the foundation of a very pointed legal attack. And that attack is going to come from one of the sharpest legal minds Port Charles has ever seen, Alexis Davis. Dante doesn't underestimate Alexis for a second. He's seen her in court, the way she builds an argument like a slow-burning fuse, laying down details that seem harmless until they all ignite at once. She doesn't just poke holes in a case, she turns the entire investigative process into the real defendant. Right now, he can practically hear the line of questioning she's preparing. Did the police rush to judgment? Did they ignore evidence that didn't fit their narrative? Did they focus on the most convenient suspects at the expense of the truth? If Alexis can convince a judge or jury that the investigation was careless, the entire case around Drew's shooting could implode before it has a chance to stand on its own. That is why Dante has reached out for backup, not from a lawyer, but from a fellow cop who knows what it means to balance instinct with procedure. Nathan West walks into the room with his usual calm presence, but even he feels the weight of what's at stake. As a detective, Nathan has his own scars from past cases, times when he followed his gut and it paid off, and times when it nearly cost everything. Together, he and Dante form a quiet alliance, not just to find out who pulled the trigger, but to build something so solid that even Alexis, with all her experience and righteous fury, can't tear it down. Their first task isn't glamorous. It's not about chasing down suspects in dark alleys or confronting anyone in handcuffs. Instead, they sit side by side, going through timelines and prior statements, looking for cracks that Alexis will try to pry open. Every contradictory timestamp, every gap in surveillance footage, every witness who changed their story even slightly, these are the pressure points she'll press. Dante wants to get there first. If there are errors, he needs to own them, fix them, or at least understand them before they're used as weapons in court. Nathan, with his methodical way of thinking, suggests they stop treating the victim, the suspects, and the crime scene as separate pieces and instead rebuild the entire sequence from the ground up. As they reconstruct the night of the shooting, one name keeps circling back like a boomerang: Curtis Ashford. Curtis is not a stranger to either of them. He's a man who has reinvented himself more than once, walking the line between the law and the shadows with the kind of ease that makes some people admire him and others feel uneasy. Former private investigator, nightclub owner, partner to people who've lived on both sides of the system, Curtis is the sort of man who knows too much, has seen too much, and understands exactly how fragile the line between guilt and innocence can be. On paper, Curtis has an alibi. On the night Drew was attacked, he wasn't anywhere near the crime scene, at least, that's what his original statement and a handful of corroborating details suggest. But when Dante and Nathan start comparing those details against phone records, traffic cameras, and other witness accounts, it becomes clear that the story might not hold up as cleanly as it first appeared. It's not that Curtis's alibi is obviously false, it's that there are gaps. Moments where his whereabouts are unclear, segments of time that depend on the word of people with their own loyalties and agendas. Dante feels a familiar tension rising in his chest. He doesn't want to believe that Curtis might be lying, or even bending the truth. This is a man who has stood shoulder to shoulder with some of Port Charles's most respected residents, a man who has tried, in his own messy way, to leave his more dubious choices behind him. But Dante's badge doesn't give him the luxury of trusting instinct over facts. If Curtis's alibi can't survive serious scrutiny, then Dante has a duty to look closer, because if he doesn't, Alexis will, and she'll do it with the full force of the courtroom behind her. Nathan, more detached emotionally, is the first to say what Dante doesn't want to put into words. They can't treat Curtis differently just because of their history. If the investigation is going to be bulletproof, then no one is off limits, not even people they like, respect, or quietly root for. The very thing Alexis is preparing to accuse them of, favoritism, tunnel vision, selective investigation, cannot be allowed to be true. So they add Curtis's name to the short list, not as a confirmed suspect, but as a question mark that demands answers. Outside the walls of PCPD, life in Port Charles moves on as if nothing has changed. People go to work, children go to school, and regulars drift in and out of the Metro Court. But beneath that surface, the shooting has unsettled the balance of power. Drew's allies want justice, fast, and they don't care who has to be dragged into the spotlight to get it. His enemies, known and unknown, are watching closely, waiting to see which way the investigation bends. For them, any sign that the police are floundering might be an invitation to push harder, to cover their tracks more deeply, or to exploit the chaos for their own purposes. Curtis, for his part, feels the ground tremble long before the official questions arrive. He has lived long enough in the gray areas of life to recognize the shift in tone when a friendly conversation starts to sound like a preliminary interrogation. People who once spoke easily around him are suddenly more cautious. Phone calls feel shorter, eyes linger longer, as if trying to decide whether he's a lifeline or a liability. He knows how this works. Once your name is tied to a crime, even loosely, it can take years to shake off the shadow, whether you did anything wrong or not. What makes Curtis particularly vulnerable is that his recent past is already full of strain. He's juggling complicated relationships, dreams that have cost more than he expected, and the quiet guilt that comes from choices he's made in the name of survival. When Dante and Nathan finally sit down with him, it's not an ambush, but it certainly isn't a casual chat. They don't accuse, but they push. They ask him to walk them through his movements again, minute by minute, knowing full well that a second telling of an alibi often reveals discrepancies the first one didn't. Curtis feels the pressure and reacts the way someone with his history would. Guarded, defensive, but still trying to project the image of a man who has nothing to hide. Even as they question Curtis, Dante can't help thinking about how this will play in court. Alexis doesn't have to prove that Curtis is guilty of anything, she just has to show that the police were careless in how they treated him. If she can argue that they either overlooked him as a suspect or unfairly targeted him to make the case look stronger, she will use it as a cudgel to smash the whole investigation apart. That means Dante and Nathan are walking a razor's edge. They need to be thorough without appearing biased, relentless without becoming unfair, open-minded without losing focus. Every question they ask Curtis might one day be read aloud in a courtroom, dissected in front of a judge. Back in her own space, Alexis is building her strategy from the opposite direction. She knows precisely how hard Dante and Nathan work, and that's exactly what worries her. Overzealous officers can sometimes blur the line between gathering evidence and shaping it to fit a theory. She'll scrutinize every arrest report, every witness statement, every chain of custody form, hunting for a misstep that she can magnify. In her view, it's not enough that someone be punished. They must be punished the right way, through a process that is transparent and fair. If that process fails, she sees it as her duty to tear it down, whether the client she's defending is a saint, a sinner, or something in between. As the days pass, the case around Drew's shooting becomes less about one violent act and more about a web of choices. Who told the truth when it was hard, who lied when it was convenient, who stayed silent when speaking up might have changed everything. Curtis finds himself at the center of this web, not because anyone can definitively place a gun in his hand, but because he occupies a crossroads of relationships, secrets, and opportunities. His connections to people on both sides of the law mean he is both a potential source of information and a possible suspect. This is where Curtis's challenges truly begin. The pressure from law enforcement is only one side of the storm. On the other side are the people he cares about, who are starting to hear rumors that the police may be taking a harder look at him. Some of them stand by him unquestioningly, insisting that Curtis is not the kind of man who would ever be involved in something like this. Others are not so sure. Doubt is a quiet poison, and once it enters a relationship, it can erode trust faster than any direct accusation. Curtis can feel those cracks forming in real time, especially with those who already felt unsettled by the secrets he has kept in the past. In a darker corner of his mind, Curtis can't ignore the truth that haunts him: he has crossed lines before. He has done questionable things, for what felt like good reasons, and told himself that the ends justified the means. Even if he had nothing to do with Drew's shooting, he can't erase the fact that his history makes him an easy target. Maybe someone is counting on that. Maybe the real culprit is hiding behind Curtis's complicated reputation, hoping that the police and Alexis will get so entangled in arguments about procedure and bias that they'll lose sight of the actual shooter. For Dante and Nathan, the deeper they dig, the more they see how fragile their position is. If they are seen as going too easy on Curtis because of their personal ties, Alexis will claim they protected a friend instead of following the evidence. If they push too hard without something concrete, she'll paint them as officers desperate to pin the crime on someone who simply fits a convenient narrative. In either scenario, the accusation will be that they cared more about closing the case than solving it honestly. That is the trap Alexis is preparing, and the only way out is for Dante and Nathan to refuse to take any shortcut, no matter how tempting. Still, there's no denying that Curtis's path forward is about to become even more treacherous. As new witness statements surface and fresh forensic details are analyzed, more questions will be coming his way. Business ventures he thought were safely in the past may resurface under an unforgiving spotlight. Old alliances could be dragged into the investigation, forcing Curtis to choose between protecting himself and protecting others. Every choice he makes from this point on will either help him reclaim the life he's tried so hard to build or push him closer to losing it entirely. Port Charles has seen its share of scandals, but this unfolding drama feels different. It's not just about a single crime, it's about the institutions and relationships that are supposed to hold the community together. A wounded man fighting for justice, a legal powerhouse ready to dissect the system, two detectives determined to prove they can do their jobs without crossing ethical lines, and a man like Curtis, standing at the intersection of past mistakes and present suspicion. All of them are woven into a story that is still being written. As the investigation barrels forward, one thing is certain: Curtis's trials are far from over. The questions Dante and Nathan are asking now are only the beginning. The real test will come when the case breaks open in public, when courtrooms fill, when Alexis rises to her feet and the entire city watches to see whose version of the truth will survive. And in that moment, whether he is ultimately cleared or further entangled, Curtis will have to confront not just what the police believe about him, but what he believes about himself.